It's time to bring you yet another amazing episode. And now, welcome your host.
Now, the whole essence of embracing personal development is for us to become a truer and a better version of ourselves. It's a whole new meaning to life when we intentionally improve ourselves, not just personally alone, but also spiritually. Now, I'd like you to understand that on Life Only by Omobola Stephen, we also focus on spirituality topics. And now we love to stir the minds of our audience with life transforming insight from experts and professionals who have been there and also done that. This is the mission of the show. Indeed, we offer disruptive yet constructive mindset conversations that is going to pivot the changes you and I need in this side of eternity in order for us to live a really fulfilling life as it was originally meant to be. Now, this is the mission and the focus of the show. I'm your host, Omobola Stephen, and welcome to Live Rolly by Omobola Stephen. Today, I have Jim Bouchard, who is a leadership activist, author, speaker, and the founder of the Human-Centric Leadership Movement. Great to have you on the show, Jim.
Thanks for thank you so much for your hospitality. I really appreciate being here with you. Yeah.
Great and honor to have you on the show. We'll be talking about inspire, empower, guide. Now, the essential disciplines for leaders for today. You have a great expertise in this regard, especially in terms of human-centric leadership. And so our discussion will be centered in this area. So first off, what did you say that the age of command and control is dead?
Wow, I wish I had been the first one to come up with that. The age of command and control is absolutely dead. It probably has never worked all that effectively to begin with. When you think about it, now this doesn't mean, people confuse it sometimes. It doesn't mean that sometimes we don't willingly follow orders. We do. In fact, when I was a young man, I was a firefighter. And there are times when the officer, the lieutenant, the captain, the chief has to give orders and we have to follow them. I mean, our lives depend on it. But here's the thing, will we follow an order willfully if we don't trust and respect the person who's giving that command, you see? So it points back to, again, the development of meaningful human connections, right? Leaders have to build the trust, the respect, and the loyalty of the people that they serve and the people who trust in their leadership. So thankfully, the academic world is coming around to us again, right? You pick up any issue of Harvard Business Review, Wall Street Journal, certainly Gallup does a lot of work in this area, and we see over and over and over again, what do people want from their leaders? Well, it's not just people that bark orders from the top. It's leaders we can trust. And I'll put it this way, people perform at their best when and only when they know their leaders care, their work has meaning, and they have the chance to learn and grow and develop. So that's what we're working on. Just barking orders is not going to get the job done anymore. People are just going to leave.
But really, leaders, leaders really, they are meant to give orders to subordinates. Don't you think so?
Well, like I said, if you trust in their leadership, right? If they've earned our trust and respect and our loyalty, then yeah, then it's necessary sometimes to give orders. I'd say too, though, we have more opportunities to lead with questions. One of the things that comes up in our workshops a lot is the idea of trying to find some answers to serious questions. Right. Well, right now, a big one is the challenge reconciling hybrid work, right? Remote work and getting people back in the office, and what's the right blend, And, I'll say, I wish I knew. I mean, I don't have the answer. Right? The answer is very individual. I'd argue that all leadership is situational if you want to go down that path. But the idea is that, the best leaders are not the people who have all the answers. We have another name for that kind of person I won't use on your show. I don't want to offend anybody. The best leaders are the people who know consistently how to formulate the right questions and how to put those forward. One of the greatest markers of effective leadership, and this has been proven all over and over again. Well, two of them actually I'll share with you: vulnerability and uncertainty. Those two traits don't fit the model of somebody who sits in the corner office and just barks orders, right? And the other thing is, this is kind of interesting. Do you mind a short story? I was speaking in Cuba a couple of years ago, and I met a young man from Jamaica. And it's funny because these principles are universal. All over the world, we share these ideas, and there's so much more. We have so much more in common than we have differences, on a substantial level. And it's fascinating. But we did run into one cultural problem. we were talking about these ideas and talking about leadership as sharing and going, and the specific topic at the time was going to the front lines, finding your leaders on the front lines and making sure they know what the objective is, making sure they know what the problems and the challenges are, and asking them for their help and their expertise in their areas, right? So one young man said, well, I can't do that. And I said, well, why? He said, well, first of all, they'll think I don't know what I'm doing. I said, well, you don't know what you're doing. He had just come out of college a couple of years ago. He's a great leader, don't get me wrong, nice young man. But he really had no idea what was going on the front lines. He'd been trained in administration and then ended up in this particular industry, right? So he had not come through the ranks, so to speak. He didn't know what was going on the front lines. And then he said his superiors might not think he knows what he's doing either. Well, I couldn't have hoped for a better outcome because I said, well, listen, give it a shot, right? Give it a shot, try these ideas, see what happens. A couple of years later, I was speaking at a conference in Las Vegas, and who comes running up the hallway? And he said, hey, Sensei, you remember me? And I said, oh, yes, I do, from Jamaica, right? He said, yeah. And short story, I said, how's it going? He said, well, he was trying these ideas. And for the first time, he said, people were coming to him, right? And offering their ideas and heading. And this is what happens when you trust in these ideas we're talking about, inspire, empower, guide. When you really embed these as disciplines, then you'll find that people are going to come to you, and a lot of times they're going to solve problems before you even know they're there, right? They're going to come to you with ideas because they know what's happening and how to process things, in their particular areas. So that was kind of a neat, I couldn't have hoped for it. That was a real blessing to run into him again and to see. Now, he still had trouble with his superiors. They were kind of stuck in that old command and control, but all I could share with him there was, I said, but you're going to be the guy in those offices pretty soon. So, these ideas are working, you keep going. Sometimes you have to wait for the old guard to age out a little bit, right?
Right, Jim, how can each organization begin to focus on human-centric leadership? Because I think it's very important, especially in these changing times that we have at the moment. How can this shift begin to happen?
Well, it starts, in this sounds so simplistic, but simple, not easy. It starts with a decision. And that's probably the biggest obstacle I see with companies, that they'll prioritize sometimes other things. And I get it. I get it, especially when there's an emergency. When COVID hit, there were a lot of technical factors that needed to be taken care of. But Admiral Grace Hopper said it beautifully. She said years ago, she said, management is about things, leadership is about people. Now, you got to take care of both. But I'd argue you have to prioritize the human side of it. If you don't these days, you just mentioned, the challenges we're facing today. One of the greatest challenges that organizations are facing all over the world is attracting and keeping good people, attracting and keeping anybody these days, right? Well, why are people leaving? I just wrote an article as to why I'm not suing HBR for plagiarism. That was interesting because I was coming back from a conference, and I shared with you just a couple minutes ago, people perform at their best when they know their leaders care, so on and so forth. Well, I opened this article about why people are quitting, and I think it was the second paragraph. It was almost identical, word for word. And I said, oh my goodness, this is incredible. Now, I'm not going to sue HBR, obviously. First of all, I appreciate the validation, and I'm glad they're coming around to it. I learned this from the streets. I learned this from running my own organizations and particularly helping people in the martial arts world. But at any rate, these truths have been around for a long, long time. We just have to keep revoicing them. We have to make a decision that we're going to prioritize our people. And it takes time and it takes some resources, right? And that's where we get the pushback sometimes. But I'd argue this, is that most of I have the luxury of being a little fussier these days, a little choosier with my clients, but by and large, the organizations that I work with and more organizations I'm seeing are making that decision, right? Now, the trick is, and this is why we emphasize the word discipline so much. Once we make the decision, then we have to embed these things in our daily practice as leaders. That's why the word, discipline to a martial artist is the cultivation of a meaningful and purposeful habit, right? So these aren't to-do list things. These aren't checklist items. You say, okay, I had the human-centric leader guy in to do a seminar. That's the first step, not the last step. It's embedding these disciplines, understanding, and I'll touch on it really quick, the three words you started with. Inspire, touch people's hearts, not just their heads, right? Appeal to emotion, not just reason, all right? And that's probably the most difficult one, the one we spend the most time on. Empower, make sure people have what they need to succeed. And in workshops, it's in 5 minutes, we can make a pretty big list. And then we spend another hour or two really digging into what people need, right? And sometimes it's very surprising, and sometimes it can be very individual. And then guiding, and that's a crucial thing. In business, we'll call it mentoring. Be willing to offer your experience, your wisdom, your knowledge face to face. And that's a big challenge right now, particularly as people are working from a distance, right? It's an interesting challenge. I don't know how we're going to resolve it. We're probably going to have, that's probably going to be an ongoing challenge for as long as you and I live, maybe longer. So yeah, but I'm not there to provide answers. I cause a lot of trouble, and then hopefully we stir the pot and we get things going, right? And then the work of trying to resolve. I love the words of Thomas Sowell. I'll steal his words. He said, there are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. And I think that's an important thing to realize. You know, in martial arts, I learned a long time ago, these ideas of balance and harmony. These aren't static ideas. They're constantly moving. You know, perfection's not a destination. It's a never-ending process, right? So the fact that we're engaged in that. So it's a long way to answer your question, but it starts with a decision. Then we have to identify and embed these disciplines and understand them and find ways to make these things work. I think you get, I'm not the lollipops and puppy dogs guy, right? We roll up our sleeves and we get to work.
And now, not everyone is charismatic. Why do you insist that anyone can inspire others? Now, I'm thinking in my head, how can we get to that kind of work environment where we can have our subordinates inspire our leaders? Is this possible?
Not only is it possible, I'd argue this. First of all, everyone's a leader, whether they realize it or not. And it's because of this, right? Everyone has the capacity. Everyone inspires somebody else. Everyone empowers people around them. Everyone guides. Now, what you might not realize it or not, you might not be cultivating these disciplines, right? That's where we can get to work and improve in those areas. But when we sit down, I'll challenge, I work with kids that are incarcerated, and I'll sit down with them and we'll find the ways that they do it, right? Now, they may be taking people down the wrong path. We have to make those adjustments, but they do inspire people around them. They do empower people. They do guide people. We all do. So leadership has nothing to do with rank or title or a position of authority. In fact, sometimes the greatest leaders in our organization are on the front line, and they don't want a rank. They don't want a title, right? They're perfectly happy where they are. So we have to help them provide the environment and the culture where they are able to inspire, empower, and guide the people around them. And that's where we get into more, technical areas. But I'd argue everyone, not only is everyone capable of it, but everybody, I haven't met one person, not one human being who isn't doing this to some extent. Now we just have to embrace that, right? And accept the hard work of trying to improve in those areas. And that's what, I'm so blessed to meet the best leaders in the world and the people who study leadership, on a very deep level. And, again, these ideas are so fundamental and so universal, but we have to, we have to embrace it. It's simple. Again, I'll say it again, simple. It's not easy. It's hard work. Yeah.
Definitely. That's why I believe that we need a mind shift in these dynamic times that we are in. Now, let's move on to AI and the future of leadership. Do you think that AI is every leader's responsibility?
Say that again, please.
I'd like us to talk about AI and the future of leadership. Do you think AI is every leader's responsibility?
I asked ChatGPT about that. I honestly did. I was writing an article. I said, well, I may as well go to the source. So the prompt that I put in to AI is, can you replace leaders? Because that's a great fear. A lot of leaders say, is AI going to replace us? Well, I hope it's comforting to people that ChatGPT responded back and said, no, I can't do that. And the reason was that it cited was that it could not accept responsibility. Isn't that interesting? It said it can't accept responsibility. That's solely a human trait. And not to get too philosophical, but we created the damn thing, right? So, we're the ones responsible for whatever it does. Now, is it going to displace people? It sure is. I mean, I don't know that I've seen anything in my lifetime, I don't know if you have, that's as disruptive. Now, we can argue we've been through these disruptions. Ironically, we've been linking, looking for a parallel, that the amount of people that are going to be impacted by this. The best example we could find was the elimination of slavery, believe it or not. How many people all of a sudden, that was a great question they were struggling with in the 1800s. What do we do with all these people when we suddenly turn them loose to free them? What are we going to do? Well, it's kind of the opposite of it now. What are we going to do with all these people who don't have anything to do? And that's a challenge. We've got to find productive, creative things for people to do. There's going to be a lot. Now, is it going to replace everybody? No. And one of the things that I think the best leaders that are looking forward are doing now is finding ways to retrain people, right? Finding ways that they can exploit AI, train them to do that. Find things to do that AI simply can't do. In fact, we do a lot of work in the construction industry with construction leaders. Well, AI so far isn't going to make a very good plumber or electrician, right? They may develop the super robot that does that at some point, but I think that's a long way off. So to embrace these things and to honor these things too, because I think there are a lot of jobs and occupations that some people have looked down on, right? And that's sad, particularly the things I just talked about, the trades. To me, I was raised in the trades. I always hold that people that can do things like that. Your mechanic is the dumbest guy in your high school, right? Until you bring your car to him and you don't understand what's going on under that hood, but he does, right? All of a sudden, he's pretty darn smart. So I think we have to return those and value one another and value the contributions we can make. But we're gonna have a lot of work to do to make sure we find something productive for people to do as AI is displacing some jobs.
Now, concerning the importance of AI, we can't overemphasize that. But I like us. I'm just thinking in my head, looking at education.
Yeah.
Do you think that we need to begin to incorporate the importance of AI into the curriculum in order for us to begin to expose our students to what AI is and what is going to be in the nearest future? Because
I could add anything to that. I think you stated it beautifully. I mean, right? I'd agree with you. It's critically important. I would say this already. I can see. I've embraced some AI, opportunities, some tools that I can utilize. I've gone to some kids that didn't have any formal training in AI, and they know a lot more about it than I do. So it's kind of interesting that these last two generations, and in fact, it's interesting now because some of these younger generations are now entering leadership spaces, right? And they're starting to become, I hate the term managers because we can talk about that. We make a huge differentiation between a manager and a leader, but management is the hierarchical position. Those are the titles we use. So as they're entering management, it's quite interesting to see that these kids grew up with this stuff. They grew up with I'm older than dirt. You look very young. I'm very old. So, to me, it's fascinating that, these kids without really a whole lot of formal training in these things. When I was very young, computers, believe it or not, computers were first really making an impact. And there was a lot of formal training education. Some of my friends are very interested in that, and they took at the time computer programming courses, right? You had to learn a whole language to talk to a computer. You couldn't access it like we do. And they became movers and shakers. This generation, they've learned it from the street. They grew up with a smartphone device. I don't even know why we call it a phone, do you? I mean, the phone is the least helpful part of that machine, isn't it? We use it for so many things. I mean, it's literally a mega computer that we carry around in our pockets. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. But I agree with you. I think it certainly won't do any harm to incorporate that in formal curriculum and make sure that kids understand how to use this. At all levels, I'd say, right? Maybe that's an important distinction. Not just the best and the brightest kids, because we've got to make sure, and I'm not saying this in a disparaging way at all, but it's just a psychological fact that people on the lower end of the scale as far as IQ goes have the most difficult time adapting to these new technologies, adapting to these kinds of things, right? So we've got to make sure we find a place for everyone, for all these folks.
Great. Thank you, Jim, for sharing your thoughts on today's show. Jim, do you have any important project you think it's going to be beneficial to the audience of the show? You can do so at this moment.
Oh, thanks so much for that opportunity. Yeah, we just launched. This has been a dream for years. People that hear me speak probably get sick of hearing it, but I wanted to have a place where leaders could talk after an event. It's awful. We start the conversation especially in a conference, we only have an hour and a half together, and then, where do we go from here? Because like I said, I don't provide a lot of answers. We just instigated a lot of conversation. So where do we take it? And I wanted to have a platform where leaders from all over the world could get together, share ideas, access resources. So we finally launched it. It's called Keep It Human Network, and it's really easy to find. Just keepithuman.network. Keep It Human, squish the words together, no spaces, right? Keepithuman.network. And we've got a free forever level there. And then, of course, you can get more involved if you want to. But just come and join on it's called the engage level, and get into the conversation.
Good to know that. Thank you once again for sharing that important information with my audience. Sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, we wish you best of luck in this project, Jim, and also subsequent projects that you embark upon. Do you like to share any social media handles, your social media handles? And also, I would like for you to drop any parting word for the audience.
Sure. Well, I'm easy to find. LinkedIn, Facebook, all those places. You can find me by my name or now by the Keep It Human Network. And still the Sensei Leader flags are still around too. But you mentioned you've used this word quite a bit, so I really appreciate you sharing. When people ask me to sum all this up in one idea, that's the one I rely on. Leadership is sharing. A leader shares. The rest of the conversation is just about what we're willing to share and how to do it. So that's what it's all about. Again, simple, not easy. And so thank you so much for your hospitality. I really appreciate you.
It's an honor having you, Jim Bouchard, share your expertise on today's topic of discussion, talking about Inspire, Empower, Guide, the essential disciplines for leaders today. Jim is a leadership activist and author, speaker, and founder of the Human-Centric leadership movement. We really had a great time listening to your expertise and as you offer a valuable contribution to the topic of discussion on Omobola by Omobola Stephen. Thank you once again and wish you best of luck in the project.
Thank you.
If you'd like to catch up with any missed episodes of the show, you can do so on any podcast cross-promotion platforms or podcast distribution platforms to bump into online. Just search for Live by Omobola Stephen, and there you go. Do have a great time as you listen to disruptive yet constructive Mindshift conversations on personal development and self-improvement that is going to transform your life and move you from where you are to where you need to be. Thank you always for joining me on the show. I talk to you soon. Thank you, Jim. Such a great show we had.
Thanks. You happy you got what you wanted?
Yeah, sure.
That's very nice to talk to you. Yeah.